can break the dark. A single spark ignites the heart. But if we turn when justice calls, the chains we forge will bind us all. When truth is silenced, when lies take hold, the cost is freedom, the soul grows cold. No one stands tall while another must fall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, defending every voice, defending every right. For the moment we falter, the moment we stall, we lose our own freedom when we let others fall. You can't stand free while others kneel. When justice fades, it's freedom they steal. An innocent condemned, a crime unspoken, and with it the bond of liberty is broken. No tyrant rules without our consent. Oppression thrives where silence is spent. Stand for the weak, the silence the small, or freedom will crumble for us all. We're mavericks of freedom, guardians of the light, fighting for the truth, for what is just and right. For the rights of one are the rights of all. We rise or we fall by answering the call. Even those we may oppose deserve the rights we all uphold. For if we deny them what is fair, we build our own prison in despair. The fight's not easy, it never will be, but justice for one is the key to be free. We stand as mavericks, together we strive, defending the rights that keep freedom alive. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, upholding every truth, protecting every right. When one is oppressed, we're all in the thrall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. So take a stand, let your courage rise. Defend the truth, don't compromise. For the soul of the world, the writing's on the wall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for
Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back, everyone. Lots to share with you tonight. Canada's new PM, Mark Carney. We're told he wants a call with Donald Trump, so it looks like a showdown is coming. Trump defying a court order and moving ahead with deportations that were supposed to be put on hold. He just did it anyway. And Mike Pekarek joins us tonight to do a deep dive on that whole question of the F-35 fighter jet. Should Canada proceed with the purchase of those jets or turn to Europe? We'll dig into that and get you all the details when Mike joins us on the other side of this.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, let's bring Mike in. There he is. Welcome back, sir.
Good evening, everyone. How's it going, Rick?
Great. Well, no, it's not. No, it isn't going great
You
at
personally are doing fine.
all. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
I understand.
Yeah. And before we get into all this information on the F-35, because you put together this great presentation for us tonight to share some details and really help us understand, we should, I guess, get into some of just a little bit of today's top news, because it all ties into what we're going to learn with regard to the F-35. Marco Rubio today talking about these tariffs. And he's this was on Face the Nation, and he says, he calls Canada's retaliatory actions by pulling U.S. liquor off government-controlled store shelves petty. Exactly.
Then he might understand part of the point.
Right.
A little bit, lack of self-awareness, but yeah, at least he understands part of the point.
Here's the clip.
I heard you describe what seemed like a strategy to get to negotiations on a bilateral front. You also seem to negotiate, you say this was national security minded, but then we also see comments by the president of 200% tariffs on champagne. That's not a critical industry for the United States. That seems more emotional.
No, that's called retaliation.
No.
That's what happens in these trade exchanges. They're going to increase tariffs on. They already have high tariffs. They're going to add more to their tariffs. Fine. Then we'll have to find something to. You tell me. Canada's going after whiskey and orange juice and
in retaliation.
Yeah, exactly. So that sounds pretty petty to me as well. So what's the difference? The point is, I get it. I understand why these countries don't like it, because the status quo of trade is good for them. It benefits them. They like the status quo. We don't like the status quo. We are going to set a new status quo, and then we can negotiate something, if they want to, that is fair for both sides. But what we have now cannot continue. We have deindustrialized this country. Okay? Deindustrialize the United States of America. There are things we can no longer make, and we have to be able to make in order to be safe as a country and in order to have jobs. That's why we had a Rust Belt. That's why we've suffered all these important jobs that once sustained entire communities, wiped out by trade, that basically sent these factories, these jobs, this industrial capability to other places. That cannot and will not continue. President Trump, this is no mystery. He's been talking about this since the 1980s, actually, even before he was a political figure. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen now.
There's a lot there.
Oh yeah, and these issues are not black and white. They're complicated. Even the tariffs we have here in Canada, they're like the dairy tariff we have. Yeah, it sounds very high, but it's not predatory. It's entirely designed to just carve out that one piece of that one industry, milk. And it's not like we're dumping milk into your market. We don't sell much milk to the U.S. In fact, we penalize farmers who sell milk below market value into the U.S. We don't allow it. We dump the milk down the drain before we will allow it to be exported, because we don't want to put too much downward pressure on prices. It's a complicated formula, and the tariff up front is not the whole story. It sounds terrible, and it would be terrible if we were dumping milk into the U.S. market and imposing a 270% tariff to prevent you guys from selling milk to us. But that's not really the case.
Well, and I was about to say Senator, but Secretary Rubio, I mean, he brings up a valid problem, but he's attaching a oversimplistic fault for it, where he's trying to set up the gradual decline. It's been over decades, so it's a severe decline, but it was gradual in manufacturing jobs and some very basic infrastructure, like metal production that was in the United States and went away for various reasons. And he was trying to blame trade there, but well, maybe trade is part of it. It is a lot more complicated than that. Yeah, trade and tariffs would be, I guess, part of the equation, but I wouldn't say they're even the major part of the equation. I just know that Trump has had a thing for tariffs, and for good or bad, which I don't agree with Trump on tariffs. I'll put that straight up. So maybe my opinion's biased, but like the manufacturing jobs have as much to do with American tax code and labor practices. And then in the post World War II era, when there was various versions of cheap labor elsewhere in nations that we were trying to help grow. For instance, Japan was one of the original ones. Japan was and Germany for that matter, were basket cases into the mid 50s, even the late 50s, when they finally got self-governance, and then we were trying to help them reboot their economies. And so that was part of it, is that we would move. So it's a lot more complicated, and I could dig down that rabbit hole a whole bunch, but not tariffs. And maybe, I don't know what his actual story on champagne was, but you were talking about very specific things about milk. Well, the only champagne in the world is made in France. It's made in Champagne, France, and if it's not made there, it can't be called champagne. And so France, with it's almost like a national pride thing, them preventing bubbly wine from coming in, or maybe putting a surcharge on it. That's not exactly big fish that we're talking about here, and wasting our time on something like that is just ridiculous.
Even the auto industry, it's too simplistic to look at it through the lens that he is viewing that industry in, because Canada and the United States really built that industry together from day one, from the dawn of the
and Mexico is a big part of that now too.
Yes.
And honestly, there's significant foreign policy in this kind of a thing as well, because if you've got nations that, and this is part of the F-35 question that we're talking about, if you've got nations that are so intertwined economically, what are the chances they're actually going to go to war against each other? Because as soon as that starts, all of a sudden everything's broken. And so, not that, but like things like Germany and France aren't likely to go to war right now because they're too intertwined. And one of the arguments that China isn't going to do anything is that their economy is so intertwined with the United States that it would be almost economic suicide for them to start anything hard. So there's a different foreign policy and national security aspect to the concept of freer trade as well.
Yeah, and it also is a question of whether your industries are competitive. When you look at the steel industry, companies like U.S. Steel, the company did not invest in upgrades and new technology the way they probably should have. Some of those ovens are over 100 years old. Here in Canada, we did. And we have an abundance of cheap electricity. So now our plants are powered by electricity, not coal. That produces a cleaner product. We have a ton of hydroelectric power available to us. So it gives us a natural advantage. It's not like we're trying to destroy the market, but
yeah, and you bring up another side of that is one of the core problems in the idea of having the industry domestic to the United States is a legitimate concern, but a side concern for that is working class blue collar people that can get jobs that can, living wage jobs that can pay for them to live decently and, have some kids, that kind of stuff. But America didn't really do a great job. President Obama tried a bit. Biden tried a bit harder. I don't remember what Trump's first term was like on this one, but moving blue collar workers, getting more trade jobs going on. And there's some of it, even in the military defense industry, where one of the big ammunition plants that we were trying to expand for Ukraine in Scranton, Pennsylvania, was using some really ancient gear, like what you were talking about. And they desperately needed to modernize, and some money was thrown at them. And so they're finally getting it.
And in my entire lifetime, our economies have been completely integrated. We've enjoyed prosperity when you've enjoyed prosperity. We've suffered when you guys have suffered for generally the same kinds of reasons. When Japan started to import cars into North America, it was North America that suffered. And that was for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was quality issues. In the 1970s, some of these cars made in North America were rusting out faster than people could pay them off. And the quality was, people started to buy the Japanese cars because they lasted longer. And those are still issues today.
Yeah, well, and that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah.
But, I think the trade war, especially with Canada, is just dumb. Because when I think of national security issues, because that's kind of my angle, the concept of Canada having a vibrant economy and freely trading with America, free of extraneous expenses, I see that as a national security win. One of the problems in the military side is obvious production, like I was talking about with ammunition, but also basic steel production and modern shipyards, especially for both naval and cargo construction, naval and commercial. But if we had a significant naval construction or repair facility in Canada, I don't see how that's significantly different than having it in the States. I would see that as a strategic advantage for the United States.
Yeah, and everything has been flowing back and forth across the border. There's all of our industries are so integrated, parts for all kinds of things that are manufactured, flying back and forth across the border all the time, every day, billions and billions of dollars in goods and people. Yeah, literally, people in Windsor crossing the border to work in Detroit and vice versa. We have healthcare workers crossing the border every day to work in Detroit hospitals.
Or even very simple things. When I was a teenager, I went canoeing in the Borderlands, the Border Lakes region, North Minnesota. I can't remember the Canadian state that's north of Minnesota. I'm so sorry. But yeah, those borderlands regions, you can get on a lake and, you're canoeing, and then all of a sudden you're in Canada, and then you go on a portage trail and you carry your canoes and stuff, and then you're back in Minnesota, and it's a beautiful country, but who cares about the border when you're up there,
Yeah. And just to shift a little bit, because this is going to play into the F-35 discussion as well. What happened in Kursk with the Ukrainian troops, conflicting information coming out of all of that.
Russian disinformation, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like your comments on that, your thoughts, because we were told, or a lot of media reports came out that these Russian soldiers went through this pipeline in Kursk to get in behind, which seems
that is
like
true.
It's true. Yep. How many, I was never really clear on.
And how successful that specific attack was is also open for debate. The Ukrainians started pushing hard on the rest of the front, from all the way from the mouth of the Dnieper in the Kherson region, through Zaporizhia and Donetsk and Luhansk, and then even up into the Sumy region. Ukraine has been going on the offensive and gaining ground everywhere. Russia, for instance, Russia's assault on Pekarek ceased gaining ground, 3 or 4 weeks ago already. And Ukraine has made significant inroads on that, looking to cut off one of the salients. Whether they cut off troops or not is a different question. The same a little bit to the east near the town of Terrorism, if I'm pronouncing that right. This is a very similar thing, and there was a Ukrainian pincer thing that was about to cut off one of the Russian areas. And again, whether the Russian troops are actually encircled is a separate question from pinching off the salient.
You mean Ukrainian troops encircled?
Ukrainian troops, no. In those two regions, Ukrainian troops were gaining significant ground and pinching off Russian enclaves.
Okay.
And so one of the, whether this is true or not, one of the Ukrainian statements on Kursk is that our salient into Kursk accomplished what it was supposed to. It ate up a whole bunch of Russian troops. It ate up a whole bunch of Russian effort, materiel. Part of that whole thing is we got in there, and we had Ukraine got in there and had better access to going after Russian ammunition. And so we blew up a whole bunch of supply depots, things like that. Really ate up their troops. And so the Ukrainian claim is that the Kursk salient was successful in that it ate up Russian time, money, effort, and soldiers and supplies, and just it kind of went to waste. And it's showing now on the rest of it where Ukraine is able to make some serious advances because the Russian army is just tired. They're either tired or they diverted so much to go after Kursk that there's the rest of the front is almost naked. So Ukraine is making serious advances, and in my opinion, look for an attack on the Crimea bridge soon. But I've thought that before, that they were going to take down the Crimea bridge, the Kerch bridge, I mean, and I was wrong before. So big grain of salt on that statement. But now would be a decent time to go after it.
And then we saw Donald Trump make reference to Ukrainian troops being encircled.
That's almost certainly wrong. If you look at the map on the Russian attacks, the thing with the pipeline is a little bit funny, somewhat of a tangent. That was one of the pipelines that continued to deliver gas to Western Europe until the contracts ran out. Earlier, either at the end of 2024 or in January of 25, I forgot the exact date. So it was no longer in operation. That's one of the reasons they could go through it, is it was completely shut down. But when you looked at that, the distance between the closest Russian advance to the main Ukrainian, it's a combination of a supply line and also their route out of Kursk. It was, I mean, some of these terms are a little bit mushy. It was certainly threatened, but it was not in immediate danger. I seriously doubt that Ukraine had any. I'd seriously doubt Ukraine had any troops in Kursk getting encircled, and certainly in any large numbers. I mean, there might be like pockets, but or rear guard actions where several dozen people, they're the rear guard, so several thousand can go away. So yeah.
So this shows the power of Russian propaganda.
Disinformation, and the fact that it's reaching the White House, and because when the president of the United States says something, people tend to respect it, but not this president, not anymore.
And so we're seeing more
degradation of American. Yeah,
and just in the last 24 hours, I've come across credible reports from credible reporters on the ground who are indicating that these troops are not encircled and it's not as bad as we were led to believe.
So one of the soldiers, I'm in daily contact with frontline soldiers, but it's not the same soldier every day. There was a soldier 3 in Kursk that I was in contact with once a week or so, but they're all fine. They're actually back in Ukraine already. They said that none of that was true, that their withdrawal was orderly and fine.
And the thing that really concerned me most was that just before this incident in Kursk occurred, Donald Trump ordered intelligence sharing to be discontinued, which, the timing was very
horrible.
Concerning to me. And just the fact that it was done undermines trust, in my view. Comment?
Anytime we're doing something like that, it erodes trust in the United States as a legitimate, honest partner, strategically or in any other way. These tariff things are economic destruction of trust. And that takes time to build back. President Biden did it in a big old hurry when he took over from Trump, but then America went and reelected Trump. So when Trump is replaced by somebody, and assuming that they try and repair what Trump destroyed, they're going to have a much harder time of it than Joe Biden did, because, like I said, America turned around and reelected Trump.
And that's where we're at tonight. So we have a president who betrays an ally in Ukraine, turning off intelligence. He's picking fights with allies around the world with tariffs. He's attacking us on an economic front, using economic force, his words, against us.
So I will say, though, that it wasn't completely filling the breach, but there were several European nations, France notably, that started using our intelligence assets. So I'm an Air Force, so we called them ISR platforms, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and the United States has a whole bunch of them. We have the AWACS planes that people might know, but we also have other things like rivet joint, or the nuclear testing sniffing planes, various drones, a whole constellation of satellites. The American ISR platform network is stunningly large and effective. Europe doesn't have that capability. For a long time, they were relying on the United States, and now they're second guessing this. This goes back to the F-35 thing. But France operates AWACS planes. Sweden has some very advanced AWACS planes. They started filling some of those gaps. Some of those nations have ISR drones, the big ones that can stay up for 24 hours or whatever their endurance would be. It's not the capability of the Americans, but Ukraine was not completely bereft of ISR information.
Okay. But trust eroded because of all of this. Europe concerned about the United States as a reliable partner. We see them taking steps to Well, they're looking ahead to the future and trying to come up with a plan to be more detached, independent in their own defense, separate from the United States now. And here in Canada, that brings us to this whole question of the F-35. Canada now, the new Prime Minister Mark Carney telling our Defense Minister Bill Blair, you take another look at this. We're going to review this now. We may not go ahead with this contract to buy F-35 jets, which has been a process, well, really decades in process.
So, you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but I'm going to blame Canada for a little bit, to borrow the South Park phrase. Blame Canada. But the Canadians have not been doing a great job on military spending. They're not alone in that. Germany has been bad. Italy and Spain are still bad. The United Kingdom has made some seriously stupid decisions on defense spending and equipment procurement. But now Canada is saying maybe the side of maybe we should take this a bit more seriously. And so if nothing else good happens out of that, maybe that is good. One thing I will say is I did just look it up because I forgot to do this earlier today, that where did it go? Canada's 88 F-35s cost. I've got $13.2 billion is the cost of that procurement, which is about right for 88 jets. That's not nothing. And there's a lot of workers and companies and profits and shareholders and all sorts of people in the United States that when they hear Canada is about to dump a $13+ billion deal, they're like, wait a minute. And talking to congressmen and people in the White House and like, this is not good. This is, a lot of these people elected Trump to be smart. He's not, but that's what they wanted him to be. And so the pushback that Canada could use this for, I think is real. And I think Canada would be doing the United States a favor by pushing back smartly. So,
and the 13 billion is just the beginning, because these jets are very expensive to operate per hour. They need a lot. They need a lot
not
of
really,
maintenance.
but yeah,
a lot of maintenance. But from what I've read, over the life of this, it's more like a $73 or $74 billion lifetime investment. Is that about right?
You look at that with so I push back hard on the F-35 haters. Not saying that you are, but there's a lot of these numbers that people throw out without realizing that the F-35 is expected to fly for 50 years and be competitive and effective for 50 years, which is not a small thing. If you throw even a little bit of money at it, but then you multiply it by 50, it starts adding up. So yeah, with the life cycle costs at the end of 50 years come up to some big number that sounds big right now, sitting here talking about it in 2025. Yeah. But if you spread it out over 50 years it's not that big. One of the aspects of the F-35 is older jets took a lot of, the Air Force measures this two ways. We measure it in dollar amount per flight hour, which is a squishy number because you have to ask what that costs, what costs you're including in that. Is it just gas and spare parts, or do you include, say, if it shot a couple of weapons off in a test or actual combat, do you include the cost of the weapons or not? Do you include the salary of the pilot and the ground crew in this number? So there's a little bit of squishiness in how you compute this, but the Air Force counts this both in cost per flight hour, which includes maintenance costs and fuel, but not ordnance or salary. Those they figure would be around elsewhere, even if that jet didn't fly, because a lot of the ordnance can go on any jet, and the pilots could be flying something else, that kind of a thing. And then also the man hours per flight hour to make sure that the jet remains flying. The older generation 4 jets were relatively manpower intensive. An F-16 runs between 12 and 17 man hours per flight hour, and that's considered a very reliable jet. But then you start thinking about that, where a lot of those man hours, every 2 or 3 years, the jet was going to go to a depot where it basically gets torn apart and rebuilt. They look at all the structure for cracks, because you've got this high performance Ferrari that you are just pushing to the limits, and metal fatigue's a thing. And so every couple of years, it comes out to every couple thousand flight hours. Depends on what jet you're talking about. You have to do that in order to keep the jet running in the future. And so all of those depot hours where they ship it off to the depot, there's people working on it in 8-hour shifts. All of that goes back into the man hours per flight hour. So when you've got a ground crew of 5 or 6 airmen working on the jet, more often than not, they're going to turn around that jet in 30 minutes if they need to, or even less. They can hotspot it, not even turn the jet off. They just refuel it, replace whatever ordnance they need to do, and it's gone. So it's a little bit complicated, and the F-16 would be between 20 and 35,000, depending on how you calculate the number. The F-35 is more in the range of 6 to 7 man hours. So it's between 1/3 and 1/2 of what the F-16 would take to maintain. Part of that has to do with the way it's built. Some of that has to do with the RAM coatings, that's the radar absorbing material in the F-35, are so new and so high tech that one of the questions on older stealth jets from the SR-71, F-117, B-2, F-22, all of the previous stealth jets, all of their radar absorbing materials were very expensive and very labor intensive to maintain. The F-35 is not that way. Their RAM coatings are very durable. And so the maintenance on the F-35 has gone way down in comparison to old jets. Now, if you look at what the F-16 did, that was significantly better than Generation 3 jets. Or like an in-between jet, like the F-14 Tomcat would take 30 man hours. The people in the Navy, the Tomcats were always breaking. Forget Top Gun. The Tomcats were always breaking. It was a complicated jet. And so every time a Tomcat would break, it would be down in the hangar, and it would no longer be a Tomcat. They called them turkeys when they were broken and in the hangar getting repaired. So the maintenance has been gradually improving over time. Any jet that they build now will be less costly in terms of both man hours and money to maintain. One of the big ones is actually the radar, but we can talk about that when we're talking about the actual jets.
Okay. And but I mean, the big thing here is right now, it's an issue of trust.
Yes.
And so Portugal, Canada, both reviewing this potential purchase.
Canada's purchase, I believe, is much bigger.
Yes.
Portugal's a pretty tiny nation.
But the issue is, why would we buy jets from a country who has a president who turns off intelligence on an ally and
an ally in desperate need
and wants to take over our country?
Yeah,
is threatening us.
Well, the short answer that I mentioned to you, I don't know if my text got to you, was Trump's not going to be president forever, but Canada, whatever jet Canada buys, you're going to be flying it for 50 years. Canada's the CF-18, the specific version of the legacy old Hornet, some people call them baby Hornets, that Canada bought, are early to mid 1980s, and they were not built to last this long, where the F-35 is. But Canada's still flying them, so it's 35 years later. Maybe even 40 at this point. So whatever you buy is It's not going to be Trump anymore. It's not going to be the person after Trump anymore. It's not going to be the person after Trump. You know, you're how many presidents down the line are you still going to be flying these jets? So I think it would be a mistake to change just because of Trump. But I also think that Canada has, because of who Trump is and who Trump's supporters are and who Trump relies on for his power, I think Canada has a serious bargaining card in a 13 billion plus weapons program. One of the significant impacts on Russia's economy from the war in Ukraine is Russia had only two serious export for cash. Only two things that it sold internationally. One was petroleum and the other one was weapons. Since the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian weapons sales have gone almost to zero. Part of that's trust. Part of it is they don't work very well on the battlefield. But a significant part of it's trust. Why would they buy a Russian piece of equipment? And America is going to look at that. If America internationally has 43% of the weapons market, that's about $320 billion annually of America's economy is exporting weapons. That's huge. Canada is 13 plus billion of that, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you take out one chunk and you're talking about one multi-billion dollar chunk, that's you're in real money already. So I think that's a serious bargaining chip. And if the American Congress and defense industries and shareholders and workers in the factories start going, hey, you know what? You're hurting us, and this is a bad thing. That's why I'm saying that Canada could intelligently push back on this in such a way that it would get these Americans on Canada's side to push back. Canada's pushing, but you've got Americans pushing back as well. I think the best of both worlds is Canada uses this smartly and still gets their F-35s. I think that is the best possible outcome.
Well, it's complicated, more complicated than I think Donald Trump even realizes, because Canada already has over $1 billion spent on this.
Yeah.
You go back to the 1990s, and I think Canada invested something like $600 million to help develop the F-35.
Canada builds some parts for it.
Yeah.
And that's true of a lot of the partner nations in the F-35 program.
Yeah. And we have some sunk costs up front that we've already spent the money on. So we already have a substantial investment in this, but the trust has been eroded so much by this one man sitting in the White House, not being careful about what he says and what he does. So now our leaders are worried.
And I think justifiably so. But you don't want to react to this as stupidly as Trump does. So I get the elbows up. Is that the popular thing in Canada?
Yeah,
now?
I didn't know that was the term, but I was familiar with Gordie Howe, the hockey player, who was known for you don't want to go into the corner with Gordie Howe because you get an elbow in the face, right?
So that made me laugh. I think there's some Americans that should start adopting that phrase as well. But yeah, I think the ability of Canada to push back on this and have a real effect on Donald Trump and how Donald Trump is approaching Canada, I think is significant. And I think if Canada's smart about it, and from what I can tell, your new guy is smart, I think Canada could do some good. I'm sorry, I'm adjusting my screen here.
No, that's okay. And Mark Carney is a smart guy. A lot of people don't like him, especially if you're a conservative. But he has the credentials. He's the former Bank of Canada governor, former governor of the Bank of England, extremely well educated. He understands economics, finance. I wouldn't want to be sitting across the table from that guy. Negotiating
economic
a trade
negotiations.
Deal. Yeah. It'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Please.
Yeah, this
explain.
guy had all that background with the banks and all that kind of stuff, and Trump went bankrupt 7 times. So or however many times it was. I lost count. It might only be 6. I can't remember.
Yeah. So good luck, Mr. Trump. You know, and I understand. I'm sure people are going ballistic in the chat right now because, you know, they're calling.
I had the chat closed.
Carbon tax Carney, right? That's the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Although the moment he was sworn in as prime minister, he signed in presidential style, I might add, a document canceling the carbon tax, or so he says, and that took the wind out of the conservative campaign that was ramping up for this next election, because the conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was going to fight this whole election on axe the tax. He wants to have a carbon tax election, you know. So that's where we're at. He's a smart guy. People don't trust him on the conservative side, but he's a smart guy.
Well, hopefully he can win at least some of their trust, because I'm certain he's more trustworthy than President Trump.
I just hope that, you know, this is the thing with the trade war. The people are not really cluing in on. Everybody's saying you shouldn't retaliate. You shouldn't do anything because the United States is too big and you'll lose a trade war. But the point here,
I disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, Canada doesn't need to win a trade war. Our goal is not to win a trade war to crush the U.S. economy. Our goal is to just get him to stop.
Yeah.
Please stop.
Is to restore sanity. That's your goal. Mm-hmm.
That's it. So we do that.
Canada and the United States will both be better if this stops being so stupid.
Right. So that's our goal. His goal? Mm-hmm. Well, it seems he has ulterior motives, but
yes.
And it's hard to give somebody what they want when they're not really clear about what it is they want. When they're imposing tariffs and saying it's about a border issue and a drug issue, that it clearly isn't. That's not really what the issue is, because he might want to take over your country and people think it's a joke, but they're not really sure. So how do you how do you respond to any of that? It's just not clear.
Well, I think one of them is like what I was saying with the $13+ billion deal, plus the maintenance that you're talking about going forward, because it's ongoing profits past the initial sale, that you can use as as a tool, or as Trump would say, that you've got some significant cards in your hand there. Just on the F-35 deal. So it's one of those things where I'm not sure Canada is overly serious about getting rid of the F-35 deal, but bringing it up and just threatening it, to me, is a smart thing to do.
And so, but you are still in the camp of the F-35 is
Yes.
probably the best choice for Canada.
Yes.
And what we'll do is we'll take a little break here, and then we'll come back, and Mike has created this whole presentation for us tonight to explain why he still entertains that position. So stay with us, and we'll continue on the other side.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV,
The entire world is watching.
on social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, and before we get into your presentation, I'd like to get your comments on this ceasefire, proposed ceasefire. My assessment has been that Vladimir Putin is engaging in doublespeak, saying on the one hand that he supports the idea of a ceasefire, but then comes up with all these conditions that suggest to me he doesn't want peace at all, and that this is going to be a no. He's rejecting it. Essentially, he's saying he's in favor of it while rejecting it. What's your view?
That's what I'm getting. So we're seeing out of Putin what we've been seeing for the last 3 years, even a little bit longer as the war was threatening and the buildup was happening pre-war. Putin has had his specific goals in Ukraine in terms of having either a Ukrainian government that's a puppet like Belarus, or having a Ukraine just simply absorbed into Russia. Certainly parts of Ukraine he would like to absorb into Russia, as his illegal claimed annexations are demonstrating. But the conditions that he's laying out for this ceasefire, what he's doing, if you look at that, you're like, well, these are all of his victory goals. So these are all of the things that he wanted to accomplish with a military invasion. And what he's trying to do with this ceasefire is accomplish these things without actually being able to do it on the battlefield. So he's trying to win militarily without being able to win militarily. That's how I'm reading it. And I think Ukraine should reject it. I think there's nothing. Ukraine did get some concessions out of the White House, where some significant things were entered into the board by Ukraine, talking with the United States. I believe Witkoff was at that negotiation, possibly Rubio, but I'd have to look. One of them was the return of kidnapped Ukrainian children. And Russia has claimed tens, if not hundreds of thousands. I think they put out some absurd number like 700,000. I don't think that's right. I think it's more in the range of 20 to 50,000, but that's still significant. And every single one of those kidnapped children is a war crime. So Ukraine was able to insert the return of kidnapped Ukrainian children into these negotiations, and the White House accepted that. That's on the table right now. So we'll see where this goes. I don't see Putin giving in. There was a little bit of an unexpected turn from the Trump White House, where he added additional sanctions onto the Russian oil industry, where previously, because there were a lot of nations around the world that had previously been relying on Russian petroleum for their own economies. And like I mentioned before, those gas pipeline contracts dried up without replacement, so the pipelines aren't working. But there were additional sanctions placed on how the financial transactions for the oil can be processed. And so a lot of the people that had been still buying Russian gas no longer can, because they can't use the banking system. So to me, that was a little bit unexpected. I cheered a little bit. I want to know how that got past Trump, but you never know. There have been some mixed results in these negotiations. If Trump can secure a reasonable ceasefire, I would cheer that. But if what we're looking at is a piece of trash, then I don't think Ukraine should take it.
If this is rejected, if it doesn't work, what impact do you think that will have with regard to the Trump's view on this and the approach that the United States takes moving forward? Will they be more inclined to come back and support Ukraine more, or will it make a difference?
I don't know. I do know that when Ukraine actually did have those negotiations put out, what this White House evidently saw as very reasonable requests from the Russians, like returning Ukrainian children, was a very reasonable request. They're not talking about land or anything else. They're talking about Ukrainian kids they want back. So with Russia rejecting that, from what I can tell, and putting out some absurd things, I think the calculus in the White House might have changed a little bit. But like I've said before, the one thing that Trump can't stand is not winning and not being seen as either a winner or a guy that gets things done. He just can't stand it. So if Russia is the obstacle to that and Ukraine is the one that's playing nice, we'll see how that works. I hesitate to predict Donald Trump. I've been wrong on him so many times the past 10 years that, so we'll see how this goes. But I know with Trump's personality that Russia's playing a dangerous game by refusing and putting out ridiculous demands.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know what to expect either. It could run anywhere from Trump goes all in and fully supports Ukraine to the other end where I could see him saying, I just forget about it. I quit and I'm just pulling right out and you're on your own. Adios. And anything in between. Who the heck
and
knows?
a lot of it depends on what Russia does. So, and like I said, if Trump can pull something off, I will applaud him.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this presentation on the F-35. I'll bring up your graphics here. And you might as well, since we didn't introduce you off the top of the program. For those of you who maybe don't know who Mike is, here we are an hour into the program already, and we'll get him to introduce himself.
Sure. So those who don't know me, or those that haven't heard me introduce myself comprehensively in the past, I'm a 22-year U.S. Air Force veteran. That includes, like it says right there, 36 nations on 4 continents. I've done a lot in the Air Force because you can't spend that amount of time in uniform without doing a lot. So if somebody's done 20 plus years, they've got stories, and some of them are worth listening to. Since the year I retired in October of 23, I promoted to civilian, as we call it. Then I started working a little bit more formally on helping Ukrainian soldiers. While I was in the Air Force, they sent me through Ukraine several times. They also sent me elsewhere. So they sent me to Poland. They sent me to Romania. They sent me to Norway and Sweden on very similar types of missions, all the Baltic states, so Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia as well, on very similar missions of building ties and opening some doors for joint exercises, things like that. But I met a lot of Ukrainian people. A lot of them were civilians back then, and now they're frontline soldiers. So when this kicked off and the hard way, and people should realize that this was actually a war starting in 2014. But when it kicked off in a really hard way in 22, I started helping my friends, and I've been doing that ever since. After I retired, I started doing it a little bit more formally. I joined Ukraine Defense Support, which is a 501c3 non-governmental organization, what they call an NGO. And I was on a leadership board for that. I was also a project manager on several things, several aspects of what the group does. One of the things I did with a related but separate group called Defense Tech for Ukraine, which deals mainly with drones and anti-drone gear. I didn't put that up there. I'm sorry about that. But I was through that group, I was part of a NATO NGO delegation to Ukraine in October 24, because Europe started asking questions about 18 months ago, when it looked like there was a real chance that Trump would be reelected, of how would the rest of the world help Ukraine if the United States went sideways and stopped. So this NATO NGO delegation, that was one of its main goals. My part was how to make sure that Ukraine can help itself. So we were mainly dealing with drone and anti-drone gear manufacturing by Ukrainians inside of Ukraine. There's various technical details about that. If anybody wants to message me on Signal or LinkedIn or Facebook, I'd be happy to talk to them about that. I did a lot in the Air Force. You can look at that. I won a lot of awards. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Basic education. If anybody cares, this is on my LinkedIn page.
Okay. And I'm curious about that Emmy Award. What is that?
So for those of you that didn't know, I'm actually by professional training, although I have a strong scientific background, and I'm currently working on a mechanical engineering degree for a post-Air Force career. I am a trained professional musician. So before the Air Force, I had already performed with some top-level orchestras, the Colorado Symphony and the Houston Symphony among them. So I joined the Air Force. The Air Force has a tradition of hiring professional musicians. It goes all the way back to World War II, when Glenn Miller's band, In the Mood and all that, the entire band enlisted, and they enlisted as a band. And the United States Army Air Corps, Air Force at the time, took the Glenn Miller band and made a unit that was the Glenn Miller band in the U.S. military, and they went around Europe. And that's been the tradition in the Air Force ever since. I had already been a professional for 10 years before I joined the Air Force. So the first Emmy nomination, this was in the height of the War on Terror, where one of the things, the unit I was at, we did a live-to-tape recording every year at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville with some guest artists. And it was broadcast worldwide on AFN, which is Armed Forces Network, and then other networks as they might pick it up. Sometimes PBS would, sometimes other networks would. The 2009 recording was with Amy Grant, a guy named Aaron Neville, a group called Take Six. If anyone doesn't know who Take Six is, you should. They're awesome. And I'm not a big fan of country, but Amy Grant can sing her pants off. She's a great vocalist. The other guest artist we had, you wouldn't know the name of Gordon Goodwin, but if you've seen the movie, the Pixar movie, The Incredibles, you've heard Gordon Goodwin's music. So the show, all the music was written by Gordon Goodwin. And when we approached him about it, he's like, yeah, I will write all of your music if you let me perform on your show. So we did. So that was kind of an awesome thing. And it was nominated, but did not win an Emmy in 2009. The 2022 was for a different unit that was for the 2009 thing was picked up by the cable channels Great American Country and BET. and it kept getting shown year after year. I seriously doubt anyone's going to show it now, but for 2 or 3 years it was being shown. The Emmy in 2022 is for a holiday Christmas show that was we outsourced some of the video production, which is good because we aren't trained for that. But it was on PBS and a couple of other networks nationwide.
Well, that's all very cool stuff.
If nobody knows what Performance Today is, that is an NPR program in the States where Fred Childs is the host, and his thing is he takes the best live music that he finds from around the world and broadcasts it. So like the Concertgebouw, Berlin Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, the Toronto Symphony and Vancouver Symphonies are both, and Montreal is one of my favorites. Montreal has some wonderful, my favorite Tchaikovsky recordings, and Bartok Concerto for Orchestra's Montreal under Charles Dutoit. The great brass section in that group. I was with a brass quintet that had some recordings, some live recordings that Fred Child found somehow, and we were on Performance Today. So yeah.
Wow. Well, there's a little sidebar story for everybody, and that's amazing stuff. You've come into contact with some pretty talented people.
We do. Oh, this is Norway. Okay, so I didn't realize I was doing this. You can't see my cursor, but if you look under the very tippy front nose cone of this F-35, and you see that person that is sitting right underneath of it, that's me. You can see the bell of my horn that's underneath of my right arm and my music stand right in front of me.
Oh, okay. So this was the unveiling of
the first Norwegian F-35.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Near Trondheim. It's Trondheim's a city on the inland side of the fjord, but if you go all the way out to the edge of the fjord, there's an island just outside of the mouth that this air base is at.
All right. So we're into the F-35 subject now, as you can tell, folks, and where do we begin? I guess we start right here and explain what they mean by Fat Amy.
So the F-35's official name, and I've been getting different stories on this, whether this was the U.S. Air Force or Lockheed, they chose a really lame name of Lightning II. They couldn't even come up with a unique name to name it. They tried to pay homage to the old World War II Lockheed fighter, the P-38 Lightning, which is a great fighter. But why on earth would you name the the F-35 after it? It just makes no sense to me, and it made no sense to anybody else. So, like a lot of things, when something doesn't stick, there's a vacuum, and people are going to choose a new name.
Except, if I remember correctly, was the P-38 not manufactured using plywood?
No, that was the Mosquito.
Mosquito, okay.
Yes. No, the P-38 was definitely aluminum construction. Yeah.
Okay.
So no, the Mosquito is a different story, and it's also a great aircraft.
Yeah.
So there's been a little bit of a contest. It looks to me like Fat Amy's coming out on top, but other people say that Panther is more common, and very new is Battle Penguin, which I think is hilarious. But so Fat Amy is because the stealth jets, the 5th generation jets, have the internal weapons bays, which means you're not hanging them out on the wings, and you have to have space inside of the aircraft to put the weapons, which means it's going to be a bit bigger on the fuselage. And the F-35 is both smaller in width and also shorter in length, which means that it needs to have the same size weapons bays as the F-22, which is just a beautifully proportioned aircraft, but it has to have those weapons bays inside of a smaller airframe. So it's going to look a little chubby. And they got Fat Amy out of, there was that movie, I'd like to say it's Pitch Perfect. There was a character played by a lady named Rebel Wilson, who's just an astonishing singer. And in the movie, they called her Fat Amy. But when she went on stage, she was just a force to behold. I believe one of the phrases I've heard was, it's like she performed like she made the deal with the devil. She was just astonishing. So Fat Amy is one of those things that's a little self-deprecating. It's a little bit humorous, but it's a direct warning, because the F-35 brings the power, and it will perform, and it will go after you, and it will win. Panther is actually from from the movie Anchorman, where they had Sex Panther cologne. It gives you a 50% chance of smelling like a man. So that's where Panther comes from. But just the name of Panther with like the silent death that you can't see is kind of cool. Battle Penguin is because, like a lot of airplanes, it's really ungainly on the ground. And it looks a bit like a penguin waddling around when it's on the ground.
So these things are worth what, 85 to 90 million dollars a piece?
Yeah, the model that Canada would buy would be some sort of cold weather modified A variant, which is the ground based that the U.S. Air Force flies. And that jet costs between, it depends on which lot you're looking at. Some of them might even be under 85 million at this point, but I haven't seen them over 90 million in a long time, probably 8 or even 10 years at this point.
And from what I see, it's supposed to be the best fighter in the world. Is that accurate?
So the best is going to, that does a lot of work. It depends on what you want it to do. Right. Canada, historically anyway, Canada has only been flying one type of jet, fighter jet, for a long time. And if you're going to replace one fighter jet with one single type of other fighter jet, then F-35 is your choice. It's primarily a strike aircraft. It was designed to replace the F-117 stealth fighter, various attack jets, the Harrier. Those kinds of jets are what the F-35 was designed to replace directly. But because its radar and sensor suite are so good, and it can carry the very best anti-air weapons, it's also an incredibly dangerous fighter for other aircraft. It can go after you. Now, the best, I think it's more suited. I think there are better jets for the anti-air role. The F-22 would be one of them, but there's fewer than 200 F-22s in existence, and we haven't built one since, I'd like to say 2011 was when the last one came off the production line, but it might have been a little earlier than that. And so it's been a long time since we built any F-22s. I think that one's better than the F-35, but you're not going to get it. So the better and the best, I think this is the best choice for Canada. And there's a reason why there's already 1,000 of these flying, and why the U.S. Air Force wants 2,000 of them.
So we're looking at 88 of these, and it's comparable, as you say here in your graphic, to the F-22, the Eurofighter, and the F-15EX.
So the sensor suite on the F-35 is what makes it comparable to these. The F-22 is going to have, because physics matters on radars, and the bigger the nose cone means the bigger radar you can fit inside of the radar, the jet. And the bigger the radar that you can fit in there, the more powerful, the longer range, the more finely detailed you can get. The F-22's radar is slightly bigger, but it's also 20 years older. And while the F-22 is finally getting a serious upgrade, the F-22 is state-of-the-art. Eurofighter is finally getting a good AESA. They were not originally built with one. The AESA is AESA. That's electronically scanned planar array, where each individual, it's got like several thousand radiating elements, and each one of the different radiating elements can be independently steered. So one radar can do like 10 different beams and look a whole bunch of different directions at the same time, and it can do more than that, but it's good tech. And the F-15EX carries on the old F-15 tradition of having one of the biggest radars in the sky. So its ASA radar, its ultra modern ASA radar, is far better than the F-35's. But there's one thing the F-15 is not, is its stealth. There is exactly no concern for stealth on the F-15. The F-15 is one of the few jets flying where the radar cross-section is bigger than the jet itself. And there's various reasons for that. But so you can see the F-15 coming, and it's not going to hide. It's not going to be able to. The Eurofighter has some stealth. The F-22 has amazing stealth. But the F-35 is the whole package. It's got the sensor suite, it's got the stealth, and it'll mess you up. One of the things that it definitely replaced, if I don't know how many of your listeners know what a wild weasel is, but that's the jet that goes in. It goes back to Vietnam, where we had some jets that went in and they wanted the enemy to illuminate them with radars and shoot missiles at them. That was their purpose, so that they could go in and destroy the enemy air defenses. So the F-35 is a natural born killer on the wild weasel role. I would say that it wouldn't take many F-35s for Ukraine to completely take out Russia's entire air defense network. Probably fewer than 20. If they really wanted to do the job right, maybe 25 or 30, but I don't think it would take that many jets to completely wipe out Russia's air force and air defense. SEED and DEED is a suppression of enemy air defenses and destruction of enemy air defenses. So sorry to throw acronyms at people. This is the electronic attack is kind of what I was talking about with the radar, and it's more than the radar. It's the fused sensor suite that's going to be in one of the later graphics. It's electronic attack used to be in like the 70s when it first started to become a thing, was relatively brute force where you just threw a whole bunch of radar noise out there and nobody could see anything. It's a lot more sophisticated than that now, and a lot of it is secret that even if I knew, I couldn't tell you, and I don't know. But I do know that there's some of it that includes spoofing, where the electronics on the F-35 can convince an enemy radar that there is a jet that doesn't exist, but it is right there, and it's 10 miles to my right, and go shoot at that. And so there's very sophisticated things. The F-35's radar and other emitters were specifically designed to be capable of broadcasting a malicious code, so computer viruses, tapeworms, all that kind of stuff. They can take down cell networks. They can completely muck up enemy computers. It's a serious jet. Combat radius is more or less in the middle of everything I'm going to be talking about. I put the current CF-18 combat radius in the Super Hornets thing. 770 miles is more or less right down the middle. For anybody that's not American, bit over 1,200 kilometers. Super Cruise is a thing we can talk about. Highly advanced stealth. People don't think that it's more than RCS's radar cross-section. That's how big it looks on a radar screen in the radio wavelengths. But stealth is much more than that. It's also heat or infrared signature and acoustic, and also electronic emissions. One of the things about the F-35's radar is that it can actually be functional and be actively searching out for targets, but unless you have a highly sophisticated sensor system on the enemy end, they're not going to be able to tell that the F-35 is there, even though its radar is active. It used to be like the radar is a spotlight, and if you can see a spotlight at night, you can see the spotlight a lot further away than the spotlight can see you. So it used to be if you turned on your radar, everybody would know where you are. That's not the case anymore, and it's not the case with the F-35. Agility, it is not as good as the three that I put up there. F-22 Eurofighter and F-15EX will all be more agile than the F-35, but the thrust weight of 1.1, 9+ G, a few other things like roll rate, turn radius, things like that. The F-35 is roughly the equivalent of any Russian flanker jet. So the Su-27 through the Su-35, it's roughly equivalent on thrust weight and turn radius and things like that.
Okay.
So it's not as good as the other three on the top there, but it's serious. This gives you a sense of the sensor arrays that it has. There's antennas and broadcasters in the wings. This only shows it from the top. There's the electro-optical targeting system on the front that takes away all of the need to have targeting pods, which when you're talking about Lantern, Sniper, or a couple of Lightning is one of the other targeting pods, each one of those targeting pods is $1 to $4 million itself. So when you're talking about like a Eurofighter that would need 2 targeting pods to match the sensors the F-35 is built with, well, you have to add, almost $8 million to the cost of the jet because you need the targeting pods. Not to mention the fact that the targeting pods are going to light up on radar like nobody's business. So you can see where all of the different sensors and electronic warfare broadcasting arrays are, at least from the top.
Okay,
this is
next slide.
Little bit from the bottom. You can see some of the, they're not really chin, but there's a couple of things on there. There's a towed decoy on the F-35 that was more secret than this. When this graphic came out, they were willing to tell, but there is also a towed decoy that's, you can see on the underside, on the right side, the bottom of the picture, it shows all the shaft flare and other dispensers. On the other side, the side that they are conveniently not having arrows at, that's where the towed decoy is. But you can see some of the other emitting arrays on here, just to show that it's not just a jet with a gun that hauls missiles. One of the concerns in modern aerial combat has to do with loyal wingmen. This is actually a newer concept than the F-35, but its electronic suite, including the internal computers and its encrypted secure data link, makes possible is controlling. You can see that these fighter jet looking things around the wedge tail. This is an E-7 wedge tail. Is the AWACS replacement. Is the big jet. These are drones. They're unmanned aerial aircraft. They're size of very small fighters, but the concept of going into 6th generation fighters is that your fighter, one single F-35 that costs 85 to 90 million, can control half dozen or more of these $2 to $3 million stealth drone fighters. And it's kind of a force multiplier.
So let me understand this. A 6th generation fighter will have one manned aircraft with supplemental drones that are then connected or working interactively with the primary aircraft?
That's one of the proposed definitions of one of the aspects of 6th generation. But these are a little less formal. You could think of the F-35, and once the F-22s finish getting upgraded, they're going to be, we call them 5th generation, but they're really 5.5 at this point because they're starting to dip into 6th generation tech.
So for that to work, like the pilot can't actively fly all these drones. So there must be some level of AI being incorporated into this?
Some of it, but also there's some specific sets of instructions. Like there's one bit of software that they've already tested out on an unmanned F-16 of all things, where it was capable of, we call it basic fighter maneuvers. That's the within visual range dogfight, like you would think all the way back to World War I, where they're turning and trying to get a gun lock and things like that. That there's a bit of software where it's basically a chess game where if the enemy jet does this, your best counter is this, that kind of a thing. It's more complicated than that, and the software is actually rather sophisticated, but we've developed the software that could control one of these drones in a within visual range basic fighter maneuver combat. So yeah, there's software out there, whether you call it AI or not. It's kind of, like I said, it's kind of like a chess move, a chess game where, you know, if the white pushes their pawn or their knight or their rook in a certain way, well, there's a couple of counters that you can choose that work better for that. So yeah,
It's a video game come to life.
a little bit, yes.
Yeah.
And people have mentioned that before. And one of the funny things in Ukraine, and the U.S. military is starting to look at this too, is you try and recruit people to fly these drones. And you've got a generation that was raised on Xbox and Nintendo and Switch and all these other gaming consoles. And so the drone controllers are video game controllers to a large part. I've even seen drone operators using an actual Switch to control their drone.
So this is one of the competing aircrafts, the Eurofighter Typhoon.
In my opinion, if Canada decides to axe the F-35, in my opinion, this is your best alternative. It's one of the most agile jets out there. It's got significant combat range. This combat range of nearly 1,400 kilometers is in between an F-16 and F-15, where you're talking about lightweight and then a more serious fighter jet like the F-15 versus a lightweight, very small jet like the F-16. The United States has that kind of a mix where we have two different types of fighters that do slightly different missions. The Eurofighter is in between that on range. It's got a very good radar on it. It doesn't have much stealth, but it has some stealth design from the front. And it has to do with how the engine inlets are designed, but nobody would call this a stealth jet, but it does have some radar cross-section reduction built into it, but only if the radar is looking at it from the front.
Okay.
It's very agile. It's very capable. One thing that the F-35 cannot do is something called super cruise, and that is going supersonic without using the afterburner. Afterburner has a couple of negative side effects. One of the obvious ones is it burns a lot of fuel, and so you can't use it for very long. So the F-35 cannot fly supersonic for very long because it's going to run out of fuel. Anything that can super cruise can just use its normal jet engines at normal power settings, and it can go supersonic. And the Eurofighter is one of those. This has a couple of different benefits aside from fuel consumption. The afterburner plume, the exhaust plume, the giant fire that's shooting out the back of the jet when the afterburner is ignited, is a huge radar target. Something about the jet exhaust and the heat. Aside from the heat signature, it also shows up like a beacon on radar. And so a jet that can fly supersonic without that big tail plume is inherently stealthier, even aside from the radar cross-section. That's why I was saying that stealth is a lot more than just the radar. So super cruise is an aspect of stealth that you could consider. The other thing is that any missile or bomb that you launch from an aircraft in the air has an initial energy that the jet has given it at launch point. So if you're at 40,000 feet and 600 miles an hour, which would be a reasonable F-35 performance, it's going to have a certain range. But instead of 600 miles an hour, if you can super cruise at twice that speed, and launch the same missile or bomb, it's going to go a lot further because it has a higher initial launch energy state. So super cruise is a very big deal. F-22s going up against Eurofighters have a hard time. That's not to degrade the F-22. That's a high compliment for the Eurofighter. The Eurofighter is a great jet.
Okay.
The bad side of it, sorry to go back, you look at the cost.
Yeah, 120 million.
Yes, 120 million versus 80 to 90. This is my next least bad alternative, which is a good jet, but it has frontal radar cross-section reduction. It cannot super cruise. It is less agile than the F-35. It has a similar thrust weight, at least at lighter air-to-air loadings, not the ones pictured as pretty heavily loaded. Its G limit's only 7.5. It can't turn and burn as hard as the F-35. The advantages to a Super Hornet here, you can see on this payload, those are AIM 174B. Those are extremely long-range air-to-air missiles. Their exact range is classified, but they are versions of the naval Aegis surface-launched SM-6 missile, which has a range out to 200 miles. And I mentioned that, so if you launch it from a naval ship at sea level, that the fastest that naval ship's going to be going is, 30 miles an hour? If you launch that same missile from 40,000 feet and over Mach 1, it might have a range out to 400 miles. So it's a serious missile. It was developed to directly counter some of the better Chinese missiles. The F-35 might or might not be able to carry this type of missile, but there's other missiles that the F-35 can carry, like the British Meteor and the new American AIM 260. The Super Hornet's a good jet. I wouldn't say that it's a great jet, and America is about to shut down this production line. So going forward, I saw it said that whatever jets you buy now, you're going to be flying still in 40 or 50 years. The production line is threatening to shut down before you even decide to buy the jet, this might not be the best choice. And then you're also talking about, if you don't want to buy American, why would you buy this jet?
Right.
You can look, go back one, sorry. If you look at the range, the Canadian CF-18, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. The current jets you fly only have a 330-mile, 540-kilometer range. You can see that the jets you're flying have really short legs.
Mm-hmm.
Boeing F-15EX. This has been the dominant air-to-air fighter for 50 years at this point. The new version has the only thing that's the same as the old F-15 is the outside shape. Everything else is brand new. This is a great jet, but it has no stealth. It's more expensive. It does not super cruise as far as I know, but the brand new jet engines with significantly higher thrust might prove me wrong. Its ASA radar is better than the F-35, but its overall sensor suite is not as good. It's far more agile than the F-35, but that might not be the deciding thing. It does have modern electronics, and it would be capable of the loyal wingman stuff.
But again, American, so...
Yes, again, American. Mm-hmm.
Probably not even in the equation today.
Yeah. So the Dassault Rafale is another good jet. I think the Eurofighter is better, but the French needed a jet that could operate. France is relatively small, in some ways similar to Canada. And when they backed out of the Eurofighter program and decided to develop their own jet, they could really only afford one type of jet. And that one jet needed to operate from both land and aircraft. Their one aircraft carrier. And so this has some penalties in structure and the beefiness of its landing gear and a couple of other things where it needs to withstand the extremely hard punishment that operating from an aircraft carrier requires. So that makes it heavier. It'll make it less agile. But it's still a very good jet. This one lays out some of the Rafale sensor suite. This is the Spectra electronic warfare sensor suite on the Rafale, which is not as good as the F-35, but you can see that it's starting to approach it. The good thing about both the Eurofighter and the Rafale is while you can't get away from American missiles, the AMRAAM and the Sidewinder are everywhere. And even if you buy a European jet, what are you going to do about missiles is a serious question. The Brits have the Meteor missile, and the French have a couple of good air-to-air missiles as well. And so the numbers aren't as big. You know, you're having to get them from across an ocean. but the Rafale is a good jet. Look at the price tag, though.
Yeah, a lot of options. So you can get leather seats, heated steering wheel, but that's going to cost you as much as 140 million if you get the LTZ version.
Now, one thing about the Rafale is that it is stealthier than the Eurofighter. One of the reasons that I say that is after testing, they actually did some reshaping, but one of the things that'll light up on a radar screen is if the front part of the aircraft is a circle, like the F-15 is basically a circle. You can see that the shape of the nose of the Rafale has not done that. I haven't looked at the math in a long time, and 5 years ago I could have told you why that shape lights up on a radar screen, and I no longer can, and I'm so sorry. But I do remember that one of the things that you get away from if you wanted to reduce the radar cross-section is the circle, any sort of pure circle shape. The other thing that has going against it is it's got that single vertical tail that's forming a 90 degree with other parts of the jet. Any sort of 90-degree angle is also going to light up on a radar screen. This would be stealthier if it had, like the F-35, it has the twin tails that are at angles. So not as stealthy, but it's a good jet, but it's really expensive.
Well, I just learned something. I did not know that about the configuration of the tail and the nose. And I think this is the one Canada has been talking about as a possible alternative in public anyway.
So I chose this picture for a reason, because I wanted to talk about the heat signature reduction of the stealth aircraft. Saab has been making some very good jets. This is a very good jet. But one of the things you do to reduce the heat signature of your jet is that exhaust at the end, with the turkey feathered jet exhaust at the end of the jet. If you bury that behind parts of the wing or the tail structure and you mask its heat signature, then the enemy heat sensors and missiles will have a harder time locking on. You can tell that there is exactly nothing hiding the tailpipe heat signature on the Saab Gripen. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad jet. It just means that it's easy to find on heat sensors. It's probably the least expensive. The brand new E version has modern electronics, including ASA radar, some other things. It's extremely agile. This is a direct competitor to the F-16, which is one of the best out there. The Saab Gripen is not messing around on its agility. It can fire all of the NATO standard missiles, so that means it can fire the French missiles and the British missiles. It can fire the American missiles as well, but you would have options. That it's already been checked out for the British Meteor and some of the French missiles. I believe, I can't quite tell from this picture if it's carrying French or German missiles, but they're not American.
And this uses the, so even if Canada bought this, it's still using an American
jet engine.
Although I think there's a version that uses a Volvo engine. Is that correct?
The older versions do a Volvo engine. The truth of the matter is that American jet engine technology is just decades ahead of everybody else. It's one of the reasons why the Russian jets are a little bit crappy, and a lot bit crappy in some cases. And the Chinese, otherwise good jets, struggle to match the American jets. Is because the jet engines are, that bit of technology itself is a really difficult problem. It's more than just the math. It's more than just high quality workmanship. You've got to get the alloys right. There's heat tolerances. There's the precision, and just getting the alloys right is one of the things that Russia is just completely incapable of matching. And so their turbine blades on the inside of the jet engine just can't handle the kind of pressures and stresses that the American engines can. And so the thrust output of an American engine is so significantly higher. And I talked about a little bit, I haven't really talked about them, I guess. I was thinking about them earlier today, where there's a jet, one of the one of the several ways to look at how agile a jet is, it's not the only way, but it's one of several, is the thrust weight ratio of the jet. That is, what thrust is the engine kicking out versus how heavy the jet is. And it comes out as a ratio. So like the F-15, one of the reasons it's so dominant is that when you get up close and you're turning and burning when you can actually see your enemy's jet, the F-15 is going to have a thrust weight ratio of like 1.3, and the F-16 and the F-22 are going to match that. The flankers and the F-35 are going to be down to 1.1. The Gripen is going to be somewhere in that range of 1.1. It has other aspects that make it extremely agile, and so that's why I say that thrust weight's only one consideration.
And this shows how integrated our countries are. Using an American engine, I'm sure there must be other components
Probably.
that, are from various countries, all of these jets.
One of the things that Canada would look at is that the difference between their C and D variants and the brand new EF variant, the E is a single seat, the F is a double seat. That's the difference. They're the same jet. The biggest difference is the number of crew on board. They changed the structure a little bit. They moved the landing gear back, and they changed a couple of other things for the center of gravity so that they could add additional fuel tanks in addition to changing out the radar and the avionics and the electronic warfare suite and all the jet engine. This is a relatively brand new. There's a lot that's brand new in the E version, and it's a significantly better jet than the older variants.
Okay. And the price tag is right in line with
Yeah.
where the budget was supposed to be.
Some
for
of these
Canada
prices
to go.
I was having a hard time nailing down. Some of them are flyaway costs, which is literally you could put fuel in it and a pilot and fly it away. Some of the acquisition costs do not include the jet engine, which is a little bit weird, but it makes sense when you think about it. But so that's where some of the variation in the cost to buy are coming from when I was researching.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things about the Gripen that Canada probably really likes is that it's optimized for cold climates, because Sweden needs to operate like that. One of the reasons why it would be excellent for Ukraine, Ukraine would really use these well, is the rapid turnaround on the ground. It's designed for mobilization troops in the European conscription setting, where they need to mobilize people that haven't seen military service for like 5 years, but they were trained on it. They can jump back in and operate this jet. The distributed operations from rough airstrips, including roads. There's a lot of things about this jet that are compelling. This is one thing that I'm throwing out, that's because there's a couple of reasons why other nations are starting to develop good jets. Part of it is there's a limit on how many F-35s the United States can build every year, and it currently is at about 120, and that's the plants near Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas is more or less maxed out. And to get any more jets per year, we'd either have to expand that plant or build a brand new plant. And so other nations want good jets sooner than that. South Korea is one of them. This is South Korea's new jet. You can see that it took its first flight in 2022, which means that they started designing it 2014, 2010, somewhere in that ballpark. You can see that it looks a lot like if an F-35 and an F-22 really liked each other. This might come out, because you can see it has two engines in the back, but it has more of an F-35 shape. And you can also see how the engine exhaust is kind of masked here. Yeah. But you can also see aspects that look a lot like the F-35. This was constructed with Lockheed input, but it is a Korean product. So the guts, it uses an American jet engine, but like the radar and mission computer and some of the other guts of it are Korean. You can look at the nose on this, where it's more of a diamond wedge kind of a shape That's an aspect of a true stealth jet. The problem with this Korean jet, even if Canada could get its hands on it right away, because they're not in production yet, this is still a testing jet, is the first version of this jet, because South Korea doesn't have an aerospace technology quite yet in aerospace industry. The first version of this jet kind of looks like a stealth aircraft, but it has no internal weapons yet. That'll be a later variant that we might not see until 2030. But all of the weapons on this jet will be carried externally, which means it'll have a significantly higher radar cross-section. This is the Turkish version. This one looks like a single jet to me, but I might be wrong. You can see again the Lockheed influence. There's a lot that looks like an F-22 or an F-35. This is a bigger jet than the South Koreans are looking at. The reason I bring these up is that if Canada decides to go with an F-35, or a Gripen for that matter, the ability of smaller countries like South Korea and Turkey to come out with their own jets that appear to be very capable, even if they are kind of glomming on to American technology, because why not? But they're indigenous jets. This is a route Canada could take, but if Canada decides to build its own jet, I don't think you would see an operational squadron for 10 years, because it would take time to design it. It would take time to test it. It would take time to fix all the problems. It would take time to build the production plant. And then once you build the production plant, how many jets can you build in any reasonable amount of time? So it takes time and it takes money to build a jet. So I did bring these up because Canada making its own jet, to me, it makes sense.
Well, everybody talks about the Avro Arrow, but that's living in the past. We need to look ahead to the future. Is that the end of the presentation?
I think that was my last slide, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So I haven't opened the comments. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody had any.
Yeah, the chat doesn't appear right now, except for this one comment, but that's not worth bringing up. I can read them out of the
no, that's all right.
Out of the chat. If there's anything worthwhile over on the Rumble channel. Anybody have any questions for Mike tonight about these jets? So Rosie says, so were any of these jets bought by Ukraine from the billions received? Do you even want to respond to that?
Well, this is something that goes around a lot. So the Ukraine hasn't received, in terms of military aid, there's very little money that's gone into Ukraine. The money spent on aid to Ukraine are going to be things like refurbishing surplus Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, or Leopard 2 tanks, or Humvees, surplus Humvees. The MRAPs have been doing very good. Stryker vehicles, some French vehicles that have gone in there. The German Gepard anti-aircraft tank is amazing. And so all of these have not only the residual value in the military that's donating them, but they also cost money to fix up, to give to Ukraine, but they additionally, they will require money on the backside to replace them. And so when you're talking about money aid to Ukraine, that's what you were talking about mostly, is on the back end, how does the donating nation replace the gear that they're sending to Ukraine? In terms of the cash that's going to Ukraine, that's funding things like infrastructure rebuilding. When every time Russia takes out their power or water or sewer, there's cash that goes in there to help repair those. It will pay to keep the doctors and nurses that run the hospitals employed, police, old people on pensions. in terms of the cash going into Ukraine, that's where the cash is going. So the Ukraine isn't really buying anything yet. That's changing now because Rheinmetall and Boeing and a couple of other people have opened up manufacturing plants inside of Ukraine, staffed by Ukrainians, producing weapons for Ukraine inside of Ukraine, even though it's a German company or an American company. I believe there's a French company operating, but I might be wrong. That's the kind of thing that's going on inside of Ukraine right now.
Yeah, and I think the question really was prompted by all of the the information warfare going on out there,
Sure.
where of course people are saying, or there's allegations of corruption and massive stealing, and I have to say I even saw a well, I don't even want to. We'll talk about that another time. John's on the line from Alberta, and he has a question for you on the phone right now. Go ahead, John. Now, you guys can't talk to each other, but Mike can hear you right now. You won't be able to hear Mike back, though, John. But go ahead with your question for Mike.
Well, Mike, love from Canada, Alberta. Love you, sir. You are a very, very intelligent man. You have family values and integrity, and you can come on my board of directors, my private oil company, and my cosmetic company. I applaud you, sir, with your depth in research. You are a beautiful, beautiful human being, and my friend Mike, we love our U.S. compatriots, family, and brothers and sisters, and I just tip my hat to you. I've been watching the show tonight, and you, my friend Mike, you are the true version of a true American.
Okay, so John, we have lots of love coming in tonight. I don't appreciate it. But do you have a specific question, or did you just want to were you just here to just spread a little love tonight?
Well, a little bit of love, but I mean, I'm a little Jewish Hutterite Hampton discounter. Hutterite.
Okay, so do you have a question?
What jet would you recommend the Canadian government buy, my friend? Because remember, I'm in the oil business, and I love burning fuel, but I'm a little Jewish. I like it economical.
Okay. All right, John, thank you, sir. I'm going to hang up because you guys can't talk to each other. We'll let Mike answer the question.
So I think that Canada should buy the F-35, but I think Canada needs to play hardball in terms of whole carrot and stick kind of a thing with that multi-billion-dollar contract. I think that bringing that up and using that as a bargaining chip is a good idea, because you need some sort of thing to go after Trump with, and billions of dollars is one of the things that he would understand. So I think it should be used as a bargaining chip, but I think in the end, Canada should buy the F-35. Now, that being said, that's preface. So everything before, but everything what I said, it comes before the word but. So, but if things go sideways, because I am a little bit done predicting Trump, because it's a little bit hard to predict. I think he's crazy, and it's a little hard to predict crazy. That's one of the reasons why it's crazy, is they're not predictable. If it goes sideways and Canada needs to cancel the F-35 contract, I think the two best options would depend on how much you'd be willing to spend. That would be either the Eurofighter, which is expensive, but an amazing jet, or the Saab Gripen. I think those two are your best choices, and which one of them would come out on top would depend on different factors in terms of what Canada would be looking at and how they operate them, where they operate them from, a little bit of how much they'd be willing to spend, but there's also other factors. So there's roughly 600, a bit more than 600 Eurofighters total built. Some of those might be surplus, and you might be able to get your hands on 20 or 30 used Eurofighters at this point, especially if the F-35, if things go sideways and the F-35 just falls apart. There might be somebody out there that with 20 or 30 Eurofighters, they might be willing to maybe even just lease to Canada. You wouldn't buy them, but they'd be kind of like on semi-permanent loan. Because there's 600 of them out there, and I think that we could find 20 or 30 of them for Canada. The problem with the Gripen is there's only 300 or so of them built, so significantly fewer. And this matters because of spare parts, how many of them are actually available. The people currently flying Gripens probably need to still fly them. They probably don't have any spares. So you'd be looking at new builds off the production lines, and that only comes out so fast. The plus side of that is that with Sweden being such a new member to NATO, my opinion, I think their defense industry could use a boost, and a purchase of significant numbers of Gripens by Canada would give them a boost. Because like I said, it's a great jet. And so I'm of the opinion that you if you see excellence, you should reward it. And the Gripen is one of the better jets out there. So that would be my take. If you can't get either one of those, the Rafale is a good jet, but it wouldn't be my first choice. So that would be, you'd have to figure out the jet engine problem. The Eurofighter uses a European engine. The current version of the Gripen does not. Missiles are an issue, but it's a completely separate topic where Europe is looking hard at increasing their defense industries, their capabilities. Germany is looking at refurbishing currently shuttered automotive factories and turning them into defense factories for tanks and armored vehicles or whatever else they want to use the factory's floors for. And so the expansion of the European defense industry right now is significant. So what would be in the future, maybe some of these concerns that I'm having about total numbers of jets built, which translates into spare parts available, how soon you could get them, what the manufacturing capability is, that equation out of Europe is changing. And so what it'll look like in 2 years might be a little bit different. One of the things I didn't mention about all these other jets is that it was on the slides, but Canada is scheduled to receive its first F-35 in 2026. It already has pilots either in training or trained on it already. So we're just talking next year. If you go for any other jet, unless somebody has 20 to 30 Eurofighters they can give you now, any new build jet, you're looking 2030 is the soonest you could expect, even the first jet, much less enough to form a 15 to 17 jet squadron. And that's just one squadron.
So yesterday I ran some questions through AI. I set up some scenarios and, some dogfighting scenarios. So I asked AI, what happens if you put 10 F-35s up against 10 Gripens?
F-35 will win.
Yeah. So
you might not even lose an F-35.
Yeah, it's the outcome was 8 of the F-35s survived and all of the Gripens were destroyed.
Sure. And some of this also depends on geography and where they are, and were the Gripens actually able to surprise the F-35s, or even if the F-35s could see them where the pilot's busy and distracted, and so the Gripen could sneak up on them. So there's a lot of variables going on in the actual combat situation. Under ideal circumstances, the F-35 would be shooting at the Gripens before the Gripens even knew the 35s were there.
So the big advantage is stealth.
That's one of the big advantages. The radar is the other thing. And then you're talking about missiles. The F-35 has just now been starting to get checked out on the British Meteor missile. People that aren't tech nerds like me, the Meteor missile is a beyond visual range missile that the Brits came up with. It uses a ramjet engine as opposed to a rocket engine. The brand new AMRAAM versions, the D variants, have up to 100-mile range. a no-kill zone depends on the launch parameters, but somewhere in the 30 to 40 mile range, where it's if you shoot it, the other jet won't escape. That depends on how high and fast the launching jet was. But the British Meteor would be faster, and it would probably have a somewhat larger no escape zone. This also depends on whether you can even lock the other jet. So the F-35, because the Gripen is just not that stealthy, the F-35 with its superior radar and sensor fusion would just be able to get a lock. The Americans have had this philosophy called first shot, first kill, where if you can see them first, if you can accurately shoot first, you're going to be able to kill them before they can even get the first shot off. So that's the F-35 is very much in that design philosophy. Not to say that the Gripen's a bad jet, it's just the F-35 is better.
Is the technology not only the F-35's strength, but also over time its potential greatest weakness, because new technology will be developed to overcome its stealth capabilities?
Some of this is physics. Inverse square you can't get around. The frequency, see if I can put this clearly and also accurately. So if I get this wrong, please someone tell me. The fighter jet radars are designed to not only see a jet from a distance, but one of the reasons why they can't see quite as far as like an AWACS or some larger radar that uses a different frequency is because they're using a short frequency, a very small frequency that's not only designed to see it, but since it's small and you can only have so much on the single jet, it also needs to get a target lock, which means it needs to be obtain a very precise location fix on your target. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to shoot accurately. The small frequencies are what allow you to get a target lock because the frequency is rapid enough, which means in between the wavelengths of the radar frequency, the target will move a little bit, and the higher the frequency, the less movement in between the the pulses, shall we say, the top of the sine waves. The jet will move less at a higher frequency in between of those, so you can get a better lock. So when the Chinese and the Russians talk about, well, we can see stealth jets, well, it's more complicated than that because they wear radar reflectors outside of combat zones. But you can see a stealth jet because it's optimized for stealth at the target lock frequencies. At least the small fighter, the F-22, F-35 are. The B-2 and the B-21 are optimized for all frequencies, including the low range. The low range frequencies can see the jet, but because the frequency is so big, so much bigger, the target will move significantly further in between pulses. And so you can't as easily get a target quality lock on the jet, even if you can see it. So that's actually one of the frustrations defending against stealth is you can see it, but you can't shoot it. So you can see it and you can watch it come kill you, but you can't do anything about it.
My point was just more simplistically is when plasma screen TVs came out, they were 10 grand. Now you can get one for $200, a big screen plasma screen TV. The technology, or is this too simplistic? Is the technology so advanced here that it will have a longer shelf life? My concern is, and I think that you spend $13 billion and 5-7 years from now, the Russians or some other country figure out technology to just overcome all the stealth capabilities. Then you have a jet that can't super cruise. It has a top speed of like Mach 1.6, where the other jets are maybe even faster, and it loses its edge. It's now at a disadvantage to all of these other jets, where it used to be the dominant fighter?
So I guess what I should say is that everything's complicated. And if there's one thing that we're seeing in Ukraine is that some of the older tech that we thought was completely obsolete is actually combat effective still, against even some more modern tech. But what I was saying about the radar frequencies and the target lock and stuff like that is that it's really difficult to argue with physics, because the laws of physics don't actually change. So in terms of a stealth shape that, okay, you take radar out of the picture, but that's what I was also talking about, where stealth is electronic emissions, heat signature, and acoustic are so radar, heat, acoustic, and radar and electronic emissions. Those are the four aspects that a modern stealth jet needs to satisfy. That's one of the reasons why the Russian Su-57 is not considered a stealth jet, is it doesn't satisfy all of those. At least it's not considered a stealth jet in the modern sense. But yeah, you're right that technology always advances, but it's really hard to get around the laws of physics. Now, the low frequencies, you could start talking about more radars, and triangulation, and maybe that'll help you a little bit, but it's more than that, where you've got the initial radar, but man, I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, and I'm sorry, but this is answering your question. There's something called a kill chain, where it's several steps. So the low frequency radar that the Russians and Chinese say that, well, we can see the jets, right? On the low frequencies, they can't get a lock, but they can at least see them. So that's one step in the kill chain. But then the next step is, can you get a targeting lock from a higher frequency radar? And if you can't do that, then you can't do anything. But say you can. Say you've got multiple radars, you can get a targeting lock. Well, that will be a smaller radar on a higher frequency, but then you also have terminal guidance, which is in the missile itself. At the front end has a seeker, and that's going to be small. It's significantly smaller than a fighter jet's radar. And I was talking about frequency and power and all that kind of stuff. So the terminal guidance in the missile itself, so even if the rest of the kill chain, you can see it with the low frequency, you can get a lock significant enough to launch it, but then the terminal guidance on the missile itself completely fails. So that's one of the reasons why I was talking about the F-35 with the targeting decoy and all the electronic warfare spoofing. And you're right that it's more complicated than that. One of the reasons why I would say that the F-35 is not going to go obsolete is that it's upgradable. You've got the basic stealth shape, where it's got the radar frequency and the heat masking and the acoustics, and it's already got emissions guarding. But then you could take one computer out and put another one in. We're doing that right now with the Block 4 upgrade, which is mainly a significantly more powerful computer plus new software. And the radar itself is finally getting an upgrade. The radar is 10 to 15 years old at this point, and it's getting I'm going to get the numbers wrong. I'd like to say it's going from an 81 to an 83. It actually was a significant enough modernization that it got a new designation, but it's already receiving upgrades, is what I'm saying. One of the selling points for the Saab Gripen is that it went after modernization in a slightly different way, where the F-35 is an overarching software thing because it wanted to gain the sensor fusion for everything combined together. The Gripen is a little bit different, where it's a little bit more plug and play, where you can take the mission computer out and put a better one in. You can take the radar out and put a better one in. That does mean that it can't achieve the same sort of sensor fusion, but it means that the more modularity of the design, you can upgrade some things faster as the new things come along.
Okay. Let's take a little break, and then when we come back, we'll head into the final leg of tonight's program. Stay with us.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
So I'm going to dip back into the chat here over on Rumble for a moment. And
Well,
just
you
see
don't
if
want
there
me
are
to completely nerd out and go way too technical, then I probably should.
Apparently, I'm a warmonger,
Uh-huh.
according to some of the people in the chat
I
tonight.
don't necessarily understand that, because there's like, you defend against invasion and you're a warmonger, but you weren't the one that started it and you didn't want it to start in the first place. I don't get it, but it's one of those Russian, like the bots are out there in force now talking about warmongers and stuff.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense, but it's out there.
So does anybody out there have any last questions for Mike tonight? Thank you, Lindy. She says, no, you're not. Thank you. I appreciate that. At least, yeah, I'm not. I'm not in favor of war. I don't know who. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Any other questions for Mike tonight? I guess it really, Mike, it's you know, to come full circle, it isn't really just about these jets. It's about an issue of diplomacy. It's an issue of trust. It's about when you're the leader of a country, you need to choose your words carefully, and be careful how you behave and how you treat your friends. That's really what it's coming down to. I mean, look at the disaster we have on our hands tonight, where Canada is maybe, you know, rethinking this whole acquisition of F-35s, which really began all the way back in 1995, the process.
Oh, at the beginning of the Joint Strike Fighter program.
Yeah.
Before there was an F-35. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it goes all of that's when the process really began. That long ago to get to today, and now because of what's happened with Mr. Trump, it might all go up in smoke. And
from the
else.
From the American perspective, one of the problems that I see is that, I mean, you talk about trust is broken now, but how long will trust be broken going forward? What's it going to look like? And like I said, that, you know, Trump served one term and Biden took over and he was able to repair it. And he's like, yeah, Trump was a jerk, but he's gone now. But then America turned around and reelected him. So when Trump leaves office again, because he's not a young man, he might not even serve, because he's not healthy, he's fat, he eats like crap, he doesn't exercise and hasn't for 50 years. He's a coronary waiting to happen. That he might not serve out his second term, because people don't think about it, but at the start of his second term here, he is older than Joe Biden was when he took office in 2021. So he is currently older than Joe Biden was when Joe Biden assumed the presidency.
Yeah, how old is he now? 80.
Joe Biden or Trump?
Trump.
I'd like to say he's 78, but I have to look it up.
I will look it up. I'm curious.
But but going forward, if we were willing to elect an idiot again, and whoever takes over from him, maybe it'll flip and it'll be someone more sane. But then what happens in the election after that? So there's this long-term trust problem going on with the United States right now, where even if the next president is good, what happens when that next president leaves office? Who replaces them, and how will the world look at the next election process after that? So I'm looking at, we just passed 2024, I'm looking at whoever wins in 2028, but I'm also looking at then the 2032 election cycle, where we're still going to have trust problems because of Trump. So this is a problem that it's not only big now, but it's going to last. And I wish that wasn't true, but
do you give any weight to this movement that's coming? There is like an actual organization trying to make arrangements to make it so that Trump can run again for re-election for a third term. Do you think there's any traction there?
So I wish that was a simple answer, because the Constitution forbids that flat out. There's an amendment after Franklin Roosevelt that limits a president to 2 terms or 8 years. The problem here is both that Trump has such a rabid base of support that will be pushing for an amendment change to the Constitution. But there's also, as we've seen, where how willing will Trump and the other people surrounding him be to defy court orders? Because this goes all the way back to the Civil War, where the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was a slaver, pro-slavery guy, Taney. He was Dred Scott and all sorts of stuff. And he tried to put all sorts of pro-Confederate rulings against Lincoln, and Lincoln just ignored him. Part of it was he was at war, and so a wartime president has extra powers. But the other part is that the courts can rule all day long, but the enforcement of the law comes from the executive branch. So this is part of the terrifying part with Trump on his making the Department of Justice and the FBI and the national security apparatus go sideways. The speech that he gave at the Department of Justice, I think it was on Saturday, was terrifying, where he was talking about going after political opponents and stuff like that. And then if he's got the FBI and the U.S. Marshals and the Department of Justice and all the U.S. attorneys and all those kinds of people in his pocket, if he decides to defy a court order or just completely change things, and the courts can rule all day against him, and the Congress is just, they don't care at this point because they're supporting Trump. Who's there to say he can't do it or to force him to stop? So that's the scary part, and that's why I say I wish this was a simpler question. The only way that I see around that is kind of like what I was saying with Canada using the $13 billion plus contract. That's real to Trump. That's real to the United States. That's real to industry. That's real to the people that are supporting Trump. There's also other things where the sparkle seems to be coming off, where the people that put Trump over the top in November to get him elected were people that were really, really bummed out or hurt by the economy. And it wasn't that the Joe Biden economy was bad. It was actually quite good. The Biden managing to stick the landing after COVID without a recession was historically amazing. But one of the prices we paid was inflation. And all of those people hurt by inflation turned to Trump. But now that Trump is talking about tariffs and being a jerk about immigration, and now we're talking about defying court orders, and all of the, a ridiculous Tesla car commercial on the White House lawn, just absurd, almost certainly illegal firings from the government workers, all these things that Trump is doing. It's not the economy. It's not the reason these people voted for him. So when I say maybe the sparkle is already off of Trump, and there's real data showing that where every new president has a certain grace period, very start of the presidency, where they can make a good first impression, start doing things right, and start delivering on their campaign promises. There's real data out there that this is the shortest grace period in presidential history, and he's already out of it. Where some of the polls are going hard negative on him, and his real strength in the last election cycle was the economy, where he had positive ratings on, well, I think Trump's going to do the economy better. He's underwater already on the economy. So the reason people wanted him president, they're already thinking he's doing a bad job. So these are the sides of things where, the executive branch enforces the laws, and if a court decision happens, he has to enforce it. If he chooses not to, but then the voters are turning on him. I think even in some of the more dire fever swamp, I hope this is never going to happen kind of consideration thoughts that I give, doom scrolling for whatever other people might want to think about terms. I think that the eroding support because he's doing so many egregious things and he's not fixing the economy. And in some ways, maybe he's hurting the economy. I think that's his real Achilles heel right now. That's one of the reasons why I think that Canada using this F-35 contract as leverage has real weight.
Yeah. Somebody didn't like it that you called Trump a walking coronary.
Well, he claims that he's 6'3" and 200 and what does he claim? 215 pounds?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, he's not. They put him next to people that are like football players that are actually 6'3" and 215, and he is both a couple inches shorter and significantly bigger than these actual big guys. He's probably more like 6'1", 6 even, and 270 or 300 pounds. And he openly disdains exercise. He thinks that exercise actually drains your energy levels. So he hasn't actively exercised since the 1970s. And he eats like trash. He eats fast food.
And he's a bad influence because he even got RFK Jr. to eat McDonald's on Air Force One.
And it's not that the occasional McDonald's is bad, but good Lord, he doesn't eat well, like ever.
Oh my! And Lindy,
now the other side of it is that, from what I can tell, he doesn't drink, and I don't think he was ever into drugs. Even though in the 1980s New York party scene, both of those were heavy. I don't think he was ever into those.
Yeah. So Lindy is saying, and maybe this is related to something somebody else said, but she says, "What did Mike mean about using jets against Trump?" Did you say something like that? I don't remember you saying that.
Oh, what I said is using the contract for the F-35 as a very real, very weighty, something Trump can understand.
As a negotiating,
as a bargaining chip against him on the tariffs.
Contract.
Yeah, and especially on the tariffs. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that clarifies. He didn't mean that we want to take the jets.
That's an absurd notion.
No,
sorry.
No.
Even if Ukraine
had meant at all.
Even if Ukraine had 88 F-35s already, I'm sorry. The biggest air force in the world is the United States Air Force. The second biggest air force in the world is the United States Navy. So we have the two largest air forces on the planet.
Yeah. And and somebody's saying that you're a great salesman. So is Lockheed Martin paying you?
I wish. Maybe I should send them this, and maybe they'll pay me.
But yeah, maybe they should sponsor this live stream.
Yeah, we can ask.
But you have made a strong case tonight why Canada should stick with the F-35 program. A lot of strong arguments there. I just think it's incredibly unfortunate that we're at a point where this is even being thrown into question, especially at this stage.
I do think that there is a case to be made, and given that Europe's already boosted for the most part their defense spending, Canada is not, and it should. Canada's currently spending about 1.5% of your GDP on defense. It really needs to go up above 2%. I'd like to see it at 2.5. If Canada can manage that quickly, that's really where it needs to be. If it can get to 3%, even better. But if you get to 3%, you're talking about doubling your defense spending. So that's a big ask. But the other thing to take away from this is that as Europe is revamping, the defense industries in Europe are not only going to be able to be more capable in terms of delivery, they're also going to start turning out better products. One thing I left out of the presentation is that there is an international consortium working on a 6th generation jet that does not involve the United States. Mm-hmm. And I'm speaking off the top of my head here, so I might be incorrect, but I know it includes at least the United Kingdom and Japan. I think it includes Germany, but I'd have to look it up. That one is, it's so secretive that I don't even know how far along it is because they're not talking. But it's an example of how Europe's starting to really go after some amazing tech. And the other thing to come out of this presentation, I know I'm pushing for the F-35 because it's ready to go now, and you can get an amazing jet at the earliest possible date to replace Canada's incredibly tired jets. The Eurofighter and the Saab Gripen are both great jets. And so the other thing, aside from the F-35 is a good jet people should take away from this, is that other Western nations in the free world are producing good tech. The Eurofighter and the Saab Gripen are both good jets. So if Canada bought or one or even both of those, I would say, yeah, Canada is going to have a pretty good Air Force with those jets. So, yeah.
What we really need is new jets for the Canadian Snowbirds aerobatics team.
Are they flying some of the trainers? That's a kind of a trend, yeah.
Yeah, the Tudor jets, which they've been using those since the 1960s.
Yeah, there's a lot of European demonstration teams that do that as well.
Yeah, but that's another story. A final thought from you tonight, Mike, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. And have you seen our Orange Orangutan Man song yet? No, I'm gonna play that for you at the end of the show.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, I wanted to do better on my final thoughts on these, but I really hadn't. Maybe I should go back to we live in extraordinary times, and these are times that people don't see very often. And I know I'm retreading some ground here, but as somebody that read a lot of books and I nerd out on a lot of gear, and one of my favorite parts of history is World War II. Just in terms of the tumult it's like watching a train wreck, but it's just fascinating. But also the technology, I love the fighter jets and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things you think about when you read those things is that those were just dark times, and some real evil was on the march across the entire globe. And you always wonder, man, if I was there, what would I have done? And I'm going to go back to it, where what you do now is what you would have done then. So if we can think about all these historical moments and like do the right thing back in the 30s or the 40s, we're in that kind of tumultuous time now between Russia and China and Iran. And I'm going to, because Trump has spouted Kremlin propaganda, I'm going to put him in there as well. We're in some really awful times right now. What you do now is what you would have done then. So give it some thought. Really, really consider what moral choices are in front of you, whether you choose to act, whether you choose to stay silent, what you choose to act on, who you choose to support or not support. Because acting or not acting, speaking or remaining silent, there's a whole lot of things that go into those equations. But the simplistic phrase is what you do now is what you would have done then. And give that some thought, give that some introspection, and maybe put a moral compass to what you're doing now.
Dark days, we are all being tested, and we're being faced with moral choices. And as Mavericks, we're all here to make sure that we protect the rights of one, because the rights of one depend on the rights of all, as the song at the beginning of the program.
And it's been a couple of shows, but I am displaying a dead Russian drone there if anybody was curious what that was. I visited a Special Forces drone operator unit near Sloviansk and Izium in October, and they're like, hey, do you want a dead Russian drone? I'm like, yeah. So that's what that is.
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap things up here tonight, buying the jets and talking about Canada acquiring jets isn't about being a warmonger. It's about defense. It's about being strong and showing that you have strength, so that you
schoolyard
can
bullies
remain
can't
living
run
in peace, right? Sorry?
The schoolyard bullies can't run roughshod on you.
That is exactly right. And so that's really what we're talking about here tonight is strength through peace, because when it comes to geopolitics and the world, it's a jungle out there. And
peace through strength, or Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly but carry.
That's right. That's right. Peace through strength. I like to think about strength through peace, though, because we're all stronger when we have peace, because we can then invest in society and things of importance that way. You know, schools and roads and picking up the garbage on Tuesday.
The safety of a nice, comfortable beer among friends at the end of the day.
That's
sounds so simple, but it's when you've seen war zones and people in combat and people suffering, you tend to look at very simple things like that in a brand new light. That just the fact that we can have that is something to celebrate and to work to preserve.
Yes. And as I was saying, it is a jungle out there. We don't want to have to live through the law of the jungle, which is why we're looking for the rule of law. But it is a jungle out there, which brings me to the song. the orange orangutan, man.
I'm waiting.
And everybody, I will see you back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. On the flip side, take it away, Maverick and the News Brothers. Here it is, orange orangutan, man. See you tomorrow.
Monkey see, monkey do. Vladimir Putin's making a fool out of you. Once a deal maker, now just a shouter. Used to shake hands, now it's all about power. You turn your back on your friends and your allies too. You betrayed the spirit of the red, white, and blue. Man. Donald Trump 1.0 had a plan. Now Donald J. Trump 2.0's a wrecking man. Used to make deals, now you just sneer. Ruling through fear, grinning ear to ear. Canada's not for sale, Greenland ain't yours. Gaza's not a playground, quit making wars. Bluffing and puffing with the wig on tight. Acting like a boss, but you lost the fight. The art of the deal, man, that ship sunk. Now it's all about rage and a nuclear funk. Orange orangutan man, swinging through the world with a heavy hand. Tearing up treaties, slapping on tariffs. Throwing tantrums like a billionaire sheriff. Dial it down, don't stop it, man, you beast, you critter. Orangutan man, you're fired. No, you're just bananas.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.